A narrow ribbon of water in the Middle East carries the one thing every nation on Earth fears: the sudden silence of a stalled economy. This is the Strait of Hormuz, a geographic bottleneck where 21% of the world's energy moves under the constant watch of coastal batteries. By all logic, this immense wealth should have made these shores a modern utopia, yet they remain caught in a fragile dance of survival. Beyond the military sensors lies a landscape of surreal crimson sands and island traditions rarely shown on the news. Join us as we explore the beauty hidden within this global pressure point. The water here has a distinctive deep navy blue color, telling you exactly how deep the Earth is beneath the surface. This narrow gateway connects the scorching heat of the Persian Gulf with the vast freedom of the Arabian Sea. Most travelers only ever see this place as a thin line on a map, but when you are actually floating here, the sheer scale of the maritime traffic is almost impossible to process. Every single day, massive steel giants carry 21% of the entire world's oil and 1/5 of its liquefied natural gas through this single, pressurized throat of water. Nearly 70% of that energy is carving a path straight for the bustling ports of China, Japan, and India, fueled by a global demand that never sleeps. It is a strange, heavy feeling to watch a ship the size of an upright skyscraper navigate a passage that feels so intimate and crowded. You might wonder why these captains do not simply steer further south toward the Arabian coast to give themselves more breathing room. The reality is a hidden, treacherous labyrinth of jagged reefs and shallow sandbanks that clutter the southern shoreline along the United Arab Emirates and Oman. A modern supertanker sitting 25 meters deep in the water has absolutely no room for error and no appetite for those hidden rocks. These massive vessels are forced to hug the deep, natural trenches that run precariously close to the Iranian coastline, following a strict international maritime path that is only 3 kilometers wide in each direction. This is a high-stakes game of precision played out in a very small room. We all remember how the entire world seemed to stand still when a single ship blocked the Suez Canal back in 2021. But here in this strait, the margin for error is even thinner. One wrong move or a mechanical failure in these tight lanes would not just stop a ship, It would effectively dim the lights of major cities and stop the engines of industries thousands of miles away. March 12, 2026. It starts with an emergency broadcast from Washington, D.C. The United States decides to release 50 million barrels of oil from its backup supply just to try and keep the markets from crashing. But on the other side of the world, the impact is already hitting home. In India, neighborhood restaurants are forced to shut down their kitchens because the liquefied natural gas they need to cook with simply isn't showing up at the ports. In cities like Tokyo, Seoul, and Hanoi, people are pulling into gas stations and seeing prices they have never seen before, sometimes hitting over $200 a barrel. It is a massive shock to the system that hits regular people right in their wallets and changes their daily lives overnight. All of this tension comes back to what is happening right now in this narrow corridor of water. When you sail through here today, you do not just see cargo ships and blue water. You see fast Iranian patrol boats zipping between the massive tankers like mosquitoes. Tucked away along the rocky shoreline are heavy missile launchers like the Noor and Gator, aimed directly at the lanes where the ships pass. Surveillance drones are constantly buzzing in the sky, and everyone knows there are smart minds sitting quietly under the surface. The whole area feels less like a shipping lane and more like a military zone, where everyone is waiting for something to happen. Things took a turn for the worse after a military strike hit the main oil terminals on Kish Island. That is when Iran started what experts call a selective closure. They are not stopping every single ship, but they are pulling over and inspecting vessels from countries they are feuding with. This creates massive delays and makes the whole world nervous about whether their next shipment will actually make it through. It has turned into a giant chess match between world powers. On one side, you have a country trying to show its strength and protect its own territory. On the other, the rest of the world is struggling to keep the lanes open so the global economy does not fall apart. For the crews on these tankers, the stress is constant. They know that a single mistake or a wrong radio signal could start a major conflict. Insurance companies have raised their prices so high that it is becoming too expensive for many ships to even make the trip, showing just how fragile our connection to this energy really is. Most sailors who work this route will tell you that the atmosphere changes the moment you enter the strait. It is a busy, crowded place where you are constantly being watched. It is common for a captain to see small, fast patrol boats following him at a distance, or to see a warship sitting on the horizon. The crew knows that every single move they make is being tracked by cameras and radar from the shore. It is a high-pressure environment where you feel like you have to be perfect for 12 hours straight. One captain once described it as the longest, most stressful afternoon of his life, because you know that even a tiny navigation error could be seen as a provocation. There is a common situation that happens out here that perfectly shows how tense things are. A merchant ship might get a call on the radio from a coastal station asking for its ID destination and cargo. At the same time, a naval ship from another country might chime in to tell the merchant ship it doesn't need to answer. Now the merchant captain is stuck in the middle of two different military powers, just trying to do his job and stay out of trouble. Neither side is necessarily wrong for being there. As they both say, they are just protecting their interests. But for the regular sailors on the tanker, it is an exhausting game of tug-of-war. They just want to deliver their cargo and get home, but they are caught in a place where every word said over the radio is analyzed for a hidden meaning. The rest of the world desperately needs the 20 million barrels of oil that move through here every day to keep cities running and prices stable. On the flip side, the countries living along these shores need the money from that trade to keep their own economies from falling apart. It is a massive circle of dependence. If the ships stop moving, everyone loses. The buyers in Asia and Europe suffer, but the sellers on the coast lose their primary source of income too. It is like a group of people all holding onto a very heavy, fragile crate. No one wants to drop it, but everyone is getting tired of holding it. The real danger is that peace here depends on everyone staying perfectly calm, even when they are stressed or tired. When you have so much military hardware packed into a space only 21 miles wide, the margin for error is almost zero. Stepping onto the island of Hormuz feels less like a journey across the sea and more like a landing on the surface of Mars. The ground is a startling deep crimson that stains everything it touches. Along the coast, the tide comes in looking like dark red ink or spilled wine against the bright blue of the Persian Gulf. These are the bleeding waves, a surreal sight caused by a massive concentration of iron oxide in the soil. This Martian landscape is a giant geological laboratory where volcanic minerals have mixed over millions of years. Moving into Rainbow Valley, the scenery shifts again into stripes of yellow and white as sulfur and salt deposits bake under the intense sun. This colorful rock served as the most important commercial hub in the ancient world. During the 16th century, the island was a center for the global spice and silk trade, a place so wealthy that explorers from across Europe fought to control its shores. The ruins of the Portuguese fort sit at the very edge of the sea, with thick walls built 500 years ago using local coral stone and that same red earth found across the island. Back then, these corridors were packed with bags of cinnamon from India and expensive silks from China. Local stories tell of the ghosts of soldiers who still watch the horizon for spike chips that will never return. It is a quiet place now, a silent landscape of red dust and empty stone arches that once held the loudest market on the planet. Floating in the deep emerald waters of the Elphinstone Inlet, Telegraph Island is a tiny, sun-scorched rock that sits like a crumbling stage in the middle of a massive natural amphitheater. The limestone walls of the Musandam Peninsula rise hundreds of feet on all sides, creating a landscape that feels both majestic and strangely claustrophobic. Today, the island is a quiet ruin, but back in 1864, it was a critical nerve center for the British Empire. This isolated spot was chosen as a relay station for the first submarine telegraph cable connecting London to Karachi and Mumbai. It was a 19th century attempt to master the globe's information flow, tucked away in one of the most remote and strategically vital corners of the Middle East. The history of this small rock is a testament to the heavy psychological price of strategic control. British soldiers stationed here were trapped in a furnace where summer temperatures often soared above 120 degrees. The heat and the crushing isolation were so intense that many operators began to lose their minds, giving birth to the English phrase, "going round the bend." It refers to the long, winding boat journey around the bend of the Musandam Peninsula to reach this lonely outpost. Even then, the world's powers understood that controlling this stretch of water meant controlling the pulse of the empire, a reality that has not changed much in over a century and a half. While the telegraph cables are gone, the strategic weight remains. Modern naval patrols and surveillance boats are a frequent sight in the deeper channels nearby, reminding everyone that this quiet inlet is still part of a global pressure point. The crumbling stone walls of the old station look out over the same turquoise water that now carries 20 million barrels of oil every day. The deep inlets of Musandam offer a silence that is increasingly rare in the modern world. Known as the Arabian fjords, this area features massive limestone cliffs that drop straight into emerald water, creating a landscape that feels like a flooded canyon. There are no roads carving through these mountains, so the only way to witness the terrain is by traditional wooden dhow. These vessels glide slowly across the surface, appearing as tiny specks against the towering tan walls that rise hundreds of feet above the waterline. While the atmosphere feels peaceful, these cliffs serve as silent sentinels, overlooking the world's most sensitive maritime gateway. High atop the jagged ridges, radar stations and observation posts act as the eyes of the strait, quietly monitoring the steady pulse of global trade that moves just a few miles offshore. Heading inland, the winding tracks lead toward the highest point of the peninsula, a peak known as Jebel Harim. The name translates to the Mountain of Women, a reference to an era when local women would retreat to these high, inaccessible ridges to stay safe from pirates and invaders while the men were away at sea. At an altitude of over 6,500 feet, the air turns thin and notably cooler than the heat of the desert far below. The real mystery however, is etched into the very stones of the summit. The flat ledges and grey rocks are filled with the distinct shapes of ancient coral and small fish shells embedded deep in the limestone. Finding sea life at an altitude where clouds usually drift is a strange reality. This entire mountain was once part of a prehistoric ocean floor. Millions of years ago, the shifting of the Earth's crust pushed these massive layers of rock up from the deep sea, lifting the bottom of the ocean into the sky. It is a vertical graveyard of a sea that disappeared long before the first ships ever arrived to navigate these waters. The skyline of the ancient port city of Laft is defined by dozens of tall, rectangular stone chimneys rising above the flat-roofed houses. These are the wind towers, a centuries-old system of ancient air conditioning that allows life to thrive in temperatures that often soar above 100 degrees. These towers are designed to catch even the slightest breeze high above the ground and funnel the cool air down into the shaded rooms below. It is a brilliant, low-tech solution to the desert heat that has functioned perfectly for 1,000 years without a single watt of electricity. The air in these homes remains remarkably cool even when the sun is at its peak, proving how well the early residents understood the physics of their environment. Moving along the coast to the traditional shipyard village of Guran, the rhythmic sound of hammers hitting heavy timber echoes from the shoreline. This is where the blueprintless masters build the massive wooden vessels known as lenge boats. These ships can reach lengths of nearly 98 feet, yet they are constructed entirely from memory and skills passed down through generations. There are no paper plans, no blueprints, and no digital models in these yards. The master builders rely on their eyes and their hands to shape the wood into ocean-going vessels that have connected this coast to India and East Africa for centuries. This craft is so unique that it is recognized by UNESCO, preserved by a handful of families who keep the complex proportions of the hull and the curve of the bow stored in their minds. Further inland, the landscape turns into a maze of twisted stone and deep shadows known as Shazami Loft. Over thousands of years, heavy rains and relentless winds have carved the soft rock into pillars, arches, and jagged shapes that look like petrified figures. When the wind moves through these narrow gaps, it creates a low, hollow sound that has led to local stories about spirits and stone gods inhabiting the cliffs. Walking through these corridors feels like entering a silent city made of dust and stone, where the earth itself has been sculpted into a gallery of strange, haunting forms. It is a place that feels completely detached from the modern world, shaped only by the patient hands of time and the elements. Floating between the salty blue of the Persian Gulf and the dry, tan hills of Hengam Island, there is a massive green sanctuary that seems to defy the laws of nature. This is the Hara Forest, a sprawling UNESCO biosphere where millions of grey mangrove trees grow directly out of the tidal saltwater. At high tide, the canopy appears to float on the surface, creating a lush, emerald maze that stands in sharp contrast to the surrounding desert. These trees have mastered a survival trick that has lasted for thousands of years, using a specialized root system to filter out salt and drink the seawater. It is a brilliant, natural desalination plant that keeps this green lung thriving in one of the most arid regions on the planet. Moving through the quiet, winding channels of the forest, the only sound is the rhythmic dip of a wooden oar, or the sudden splash of a great egret taking flight. This has long been the home of sea nomads who have learned to live in perfect harmony with the tides, using the forest as a source of fuel, medicine, and protection for their livestock. For these communities, the mangroves are more than just trees. They are a shield against the elements and a provider of life. However, this ancient ecosystem now faces a very modern kind of pressure. Sitting so close to the world's busiest oil lanes, the forest is incredibly vulnerable to the threat of a major spill or a sudden military conflict. Even a small amount of oil could choke the intricate root systems that have taken centuries to grow. A short boat ride south of Kish is Hengam Island, a place where the shoreline actually sparkles in the midday sun. The sand here has a very high concentration of minerals like mica, which makes the entire beach look like it is covered in millions of tiny silver mirrors. When the waves hit the shore, the water pulls back a layer of silver glitter that is a direct result of the volcanic geology of the area. The people living here keep life simple, with local women often wearing traditional colorful masks and selling handmade crafts from small stalls along the sand. The most frequent visitors to these waters are not tourists, but large pods of wild Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins. They live in these warm currents year-round and are very active, often racing alongside the small wooden boats and jumping through the wake. The dolphins don't follow the maritime borders or the military patrol zones that the humans have drawn on their maps. They simply move with the fish and the tides. It is one of the few spots in the strait where nature is doing its own thing, completely indifferent to the high-stakes politics of the deeper channels. Tucked away at the absolute northern tip of the Musandam Peninsula, the village of Kumzar feels like a place that geography decided to hide from the rest of the world. There are no roads leading here, and the jagged limestone cliffs rise so sharply behind the houses that the only way to arrive is by boat across the choppy waters of the strait. The small harbour is crowded with traditional fishing boats, and the narrow alleys are lined with simple stone houses that have stood for generations. It is a tight, sun-bleached community where life is dictated entirely by the tides and the seasons rather than the frantic pace of the modern world. The most startling thing about this isolated spot is the sound of the voices in the street. The people here speak Kumzari, a rare and mysterious tongue, often called the forbidden language because it exists nowhere else on the planet. It is a linguistic puzzle that has baffled outsiders for generations, blending elements of ancient Persian and Arabic with traces of Hindi, Portuguese, and even early English. This strange mix is a direct result of centuries of sailors from distant lands stopping here for fresh water and trade, leaving behind pieces of their own cultures in the local speech. It is a language passed down through spoken word alone, a living fossil that has survived in this rocky pocket of the world while the languages around it changed completely. Standing on the shoreline of Kumzar, the contrast is almost impossible to ignore. This quiet village sits at the edge of silence, looking out over one of the most intense maritime trigger points on Earth. From the rooftops, the silhouettes of massive grey warships and towering oil tankers move slowly through the shipping lanes just a few miles away. While the capitals of the world worry about the next geopolitical shift in these waters, the residents of Kumzar continue their daily rhythms of mending nets and drying fish. There is a profound peace here, a sense that this community has watched empires rise and fall from their rocky shore and will continue to do so long after the current tensions have faded into history. Rising from the turquoise waters like a modern mirage, Kish Island is a startling contrast to the rugged, sun-bleached cliffs of the nearby Musandam Peninsula. Known as the Dubai of Iran, this coral island operates as a free trade zone, filled with futuristic shopping malls, luxury resorts, and wide, palm-lined boulevards. For many, it is a playground of white sand and coral reefs, but its glittering surface hides a deep strategic importance to the Strait of Hormuz. Because Kish sits directly along the primary shipping lanes, entering and exiting the Persian Gulf, it serves as a critical monitoring post. Every massive oil tanker and international warship that moves through the strait eventually passes within sight of this island's horizon, making Kish a silent observer of the world's most pressurized energy route. The most iconic landmark on the island is the Greek ship, a massive, rusted cargo vessel that ran aground in 1966 and has remained stuck in the sand ever since. At sunset, the ship's skeletal frame is silhouetted against a fiery orange sky, serving as a haunting monument. To the physical dangers of navigating these narrow waters. To those watching from the shore, the wreck looks like a giant, petrified warning of what happens when the delicate balance of maritime trade goes wrong. While tourists jet ski in the shallows, the background is often crowded with the slow-moving silhouettes of massive tankers carrying 20 million barrels of oil, creating a jarring contrast between a vacation paradise and the high-stakes reality of the global energy lifeline. Beyond the luxury beach clubs, Kish plays a serious role in the regional power struggle surrounding the strait. The island's airport and deep water harbors are capable of handling high-tech military hardware, ensuring that this resort remains a hardened stronghold in the event of a conflict. It is a place of strange contradictions, where the music from five-star hotels drifts over the same water, where naval patrols maintain a 24-hour watch. At the edge of desert and sea, the Strait of Hormuz remains a place where beauty and tension exist side by side. Every passing ship carries more than energy. It carries the fragile balance that keeps the modern world moving. Beyond the headlines, beyond the strategy, there are still islands, people, and stories shaped by centuries of life at sea. And in this narrow passage, the future of global stability continues to unfold, one voyage at a time.